So this is an emergency video I have to make because some people out there are recommending you to build Crit Kafka or Kritka. And I'm gonna honestly tell you, anyone trying to tell you to do that is gaslighting you. Do not believe them. First things first, skill trace levels will be assumed at level 8 and 10 respectively. And the big issue with Kritka is that Kafka's git ratios are terrible. They are awful. Now, of course, I'm leaking. And I don't care. What is MiHoYo gonna... Okay, MiHoYo's not paying me enough to prevent you guys from making a mistake. So I'm just gonna tell you your ratios. So the biggest red flag through Kafka's kit is her ultimate. So most people think Kafka's ult does great damage, and if it crits, it becomes even better. Except that most of the damage from her ult is the DOT damage that Kafka's ult is proccing. Here, let me tell you. What Kafka's ult ratio is, it's 72 to 80%. Yeah, it's that tiny. That's to all enemies, and that's obviously because it's balanced around proccing all DOTs and not doing direct crit damage. Serval's ult is 162 to 180% plus Serval's talent. Now, Serval's talent deals 63 to 72% of her attacks to enemies that are shocked, and this triggers automatically when Serval uses any attack, even if it doesn't target the enemy with her skill, for example. So it's a 72% times number of already shocked enemies. I will talk about her skill and ult triggering DOT later. And now you'll probably say, okay, just ignore her ult and just rely on skill to do damage, because after all, that's what you're gonna spam most of the time. But with her skill, it's a blast with a 140% or 160% of her attack to the target enemy and 53% or 60% to adjacent enemies. Compared to Serval, whose skill deals 122 to 140% to the target enemy and 53 to 60% to adjacent enemies, Kafka does seem to have better single target enemy damage. Except Serval can again surpass it through her talent, which is 72% per shocked enemy. Finally, about the manual DOT procs that Kafka can do, which is not that great in reality when building crit, because if you are building crit, it does mean you are focusing your team to have as much crit stats as possible over having as much DOT damage as possible. A crit team would have Bronya or Pella as a prime example, and it would not be good at enabling DOT as much as Sampo and Asta would do. Sampo increases the DOT damage taken by enemies along with stacking wind shear, which is up to 200% motion value damage or 200% of his attack, and Asta will give the colossal 60 to 70% attack buff to all allies along with her speed buff that will allow Kafka and even Sampo to reach the 201 speed breakpoint to attack twice per turn, without making sacrifices such as bringing Bronya and harming team synergy. Crit Kafka would only proc her shock that has a ratio of 225 to 290%, which is, unsurprisingly, unaffected by crit, and it will deal even less damage when her skill procs it. Kafka's talent is only 115 to 140% of her damage, and it's kind of worthless because it only applies the shock equivalent to her ult, and it doesn't proc her ult's shock or even any DOT, and not to mention it's single target if I didn't mention it. To sum it all up, going Crit Kafka means you spec into crit with her abysmal ratios, which are easily surpassed by others. Going into a DOT build and team allows Kafka to focus on speed stats for the 201 speed and break effect for additional damage, with which Asta provides both speed and attack so long as Asta is E4. Sampo improves dot damage with his ult and applies stacking wind shear, while Bronya's buffs whiff completely on Kritka as the damage bonus from her skill, Bronya's skill, does not snapshot into Kafka's DOT, and the crit damage again doesn't affect DOTs. While the attack buff does help, that's not enough investment into actually making her DOT work. Pella obviously helps in every single way because Dev Shred affects both dots and attacks, and the Pella is just absurdly broken. And so, yeah, don't build Crit Kafka. It's dumb. You're being gaslit. Don't believe anyone who says to do it.